dedication, and then 10 and 11 is the end of Solomon's life. So next week, Wednesday, I'm confident we will not get to it with much time left today. But I want to talk about the theology of the temple, okay, for lack of a better term. Like, how did we get there? What did it represent? How did it actually play out in the lives of generations of Israelites? So, Solomon, it's the golden age. He is the one who builds the temple. Would you put a third bullet point for Solomon? His wisdom. Maybe you got 3A, B, C. You got his wisdom, his wealth. Yeah. So he was a notable figure in his own right. I think that Jesus is the ultimate, and it takes a David plus a Solomon to cover the symbolism pointing to Jesus, right? So there's some aspects in which David is the shadow for Jesus, but not the complete shadow, so you got to have Solomon in there. So the mixture of the two, root out all the negatives, the flaws, and then you got something resembling a pretty close picture of Jesus if you put the two of them together. All right, so Kings starts with the transition from David to Solomon. We went through it in pretty good detail where before David dies, there is a challenge to the throne. Adonijah, who is the oldest surviving son of David, decides that he's entitled to it, and he sets in motion a plan to try to take it. David is prodded into taking action and to declaring officially, very strongly, very emphatically, Solomon is the one. And that tamps down the resistance, the rebellion, really before it gets too far off the ground. But then it doesn't seem like it's very long after David dies that Adonijah tries another attempt, a little seemingly small thing, this little backdoor maneuver that he's trying to get apparently a foothold and maybe wiggle that and expand that to become a problem, where he asks for Abishag as his wife. Solomon, I think, correctly interprets that for what it is, and he decisively comes down with the guillotine and eliminates all the people who had been part of this original conspiracy. So you got Adonijah, you got the priest, and the commander of the army, all eliminated. So Solomon is enjoying blessings from God. He is clearly benefiting from the legacy that his father left for him. There are some early signs of problems. They're not really highlighted. It's not like they wave flags and say, like an author who maybe is too obvious in his technique. This author just mentions it in passing, but a Bible student knows that, okay, that's not good. That's not good. And then we have the temple, 5 through 7. So we've already been through all this. Chapter 3 is where we left off. So Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. I think that's verse 1 of chapter 3. What do you say about that? That's not good. Why is it not good?
They have been told not to make marriages with people outside their group.
That's right.
And they went back to the people they had been enslaved of.
So there's the problem of the covenant relationship with God, and you are marrying somebody who's not a covenant person. What could go wrong? Her heart is not devoted to Yahweh. That's the problem. And so there is a leavening influence. There is an unequally yoked relationship. And God warned them about it. He strictly forbade it. And it's not just any princess from any country. It's the princess from Egypt. It's Pharaoh's daughter. And that had a particular offense to God, because that's the land that he took them out of. Not that you mistreat Egyptians if they're wanderers through your land. Remember, you treat them well, right? There's a connection there, and you don't mistreat them. But you don't go back to Egypt. You don't go back to Egypt for alliances. You don't go back to Egypt for horses and chariots. You don't trust in Egypt. Trusting in Egypt is like what? Like having a walking stick, and it's weak in the middle, and it's kind of going to snap on you. When you need it most, it's going to break. So again, no big deal is made of this. It's just mentioned. Again, it appears it's early in his tenure. Do you imagine it being his first wife? No. I see some no's. Do you know why you think it's not his first wife? You don't think he married her for love? It was an alliance. Okay. Now later in chapter 7, we find a little something more about this person. Excuse me. You remember? Yeah, so he's building his palace, and he made a place for her in the palace. So what I take from that is, by this point, he didn't have, dozens and scores of wives, because she's mentioned, he's making provision for her, there's a special place for her. Now, you could argue, push back and say, well, wait a minute, that's because of the big political alliance, and he wants to give her honor, and he wants to make sure Pharaoh knows that she's got a special wing in the palace, and she's just not got a dorm room like the rest of them do. Figure it out. Imagine how do you keep scores of women? You can't have a house for each one of them. They got closets, or they got little dorm rooms, or they bunk or whatever. I don't know, but that's real. 1,000 women. So anyway, it's not good. Not good. He's already deviating. He's already sowing seeds that are going to bear fruit that is going to be a problem. And then there's this other note. In the context of saying that Solomon loved the Lord. Now, Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David. In the midst of saying that, it adds that he did sacrifice and burn incense on the high places. The people were still sacrificing on the high places because there was no house built for the name of the Lord until those days. What do you make of that in light of David? Okay. David, to my understanding, David has an unblemished record when it comes to serving God only and not having any kind of adulterated. I know the pun was not intended, but as soon as it came out, I realized, okay. Adultery with a woman, yes, but in terms of his worship of Yahweh, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's any indication that he starts wandering, starts doing things that are different from what the prescribed worship, the official worship, the prescribed way that God told them, this is the way I want you to worship me. He gets credit for being pure and devout. He did not have an idolatry problem. He did not have a problem with graven images or the high places or this other stuff going on. And yet, there's this hint that some of the people were doing it. And then Solomon is also doing it, in contrast to David personally doing it. So I don't know what to make of that. It could have happened where David dies, nobody in the kingdom did any going to the high places and offering sacrifices at high places, and suddenly Solomon, they start doing that. I don't know. Julie?
Oh, I was just going to say, there was that one little incident where Uzzah was killed because David didn't do worship to God, acceptably. And then he researched and figured it out. Solomon hadn't had that issue yet. Nobody had died because...
Fair. Yeah. I guess this is a contrivance on my part, but David was just careless. It was a transportation issue, right? Not a here's how we're going to worship God issue. Go ahead, Ron.
It appears that there were multiple places for sacrificing to God during this period of time until the temple was built. This was my observation when David moved the ark the second time.
Yep.
And made sacrifices after they had taken 6 steps.
Right.
And Amnon, in his deception to David, said he was going to fulfill a vow to God and making a sacrifice complete.
Right.
And then here in the text, verse 4, the way it talks about Gideon, says that was the great high place, implying it had been established as a center of worship and sacrifice for some time.
Right.
So, but once the temple was built, though, my thought is that was where the sacrifice would be.
Yeah, it seems so. So, you look at the period of coming into the land, they would stop and offer sacrifice. Go back to the patriarchs, right? Abraham, any kind of notable event, any kind of interaction with God, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they would build an altar to the Lord and they'd offer sacrifices. I think it's acceptable. I don't think there was any problem with that. You go into the nation and you got coming into the land, and there's just Samuel, different ones, different episodes where they are offering sacrifices in various places. So the idea of this is the place seems to not have coalesced until there is a stationary house, right? Because the tabernacle was intentionally a portable place that moved around for some periods of time. Yeah, I don't, I'm not well enough versed about it. I don't know if there's even enough information in the text to make this really clear to us. I think it's definitely fair to say that when you look through the divided kingdom, that in the accounting of the treachery on the part of the Israelites against God and them adulterating themselves and going after foreign gods, that the first baby step was worshiping at these high places. And it's noted here that this is where it gets a start.
They were supposed to drive all the people out.
Yeah,
So
correct.
there's an influence that's remaining there. If you think about, I think sometimes they look at kids and they look at, this one was a good kid
oh, his son was bad, or, his son's bad, and he had a bad father. Parents have a very, very, very strong influence on their children, but so do other things and other people. And, if they didn't drive out the people who were idolaters, it's around.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, sir.
Quickly, you hear all the kings, a lot of kings afterwards, he did good except he offered on the high places.
Yeah.
So I tried to look back quickly and say, you shall not offer sacrifices on high places. And I really couldn't find it, but just a quick look. But it tells us though, except he offered the sacrifices on high places, which was known that that's not what they should be doing.
Right. Yeah, so again, that's like the least egregious, least offensive. It's this slippery slope thing. The next thing is to start introducing prohibited elements into Yahweh worship, right? Like little trinkets and little statues and things like that. This was, again, evident in the patriarchal period. It was evident when the sons, the 12 sons were coming and going. They're finding, Joseph had one. Who else had one? Rachel had one. I mean, they had them. Was it Moses or Joshua who scolds the people and says, put away those gods you have from the land of Egypt? I mean, right up to the Mount Sinai, they're still in the knapsacks. They're still in the suitcases. So that's the next offense, is you've got some kind of image. You're still worshiping God, Yahweh, the true God. And then the next step is we start adding a foreign god. Like we're worshiping Yahweh, and now we're worshiping Baal alongside. And then, of course, it gets to the worst, is where we've forgotten about Yahweh, and now we're worshiping, multiple gods, false gods, all kinds of decadence and sexual immorality mixed in with your sensual worship practices. All right. So the Lord appears to Solomon in Gibeon. It seems to be a dream that he appears to him in. At one point it says Solomon woke up and he realized it was a dream. But he has a real encounter with God. God appears to him and makes him this offer. Ask from me one thing. And he nails it. He is humble. He is grateful. He recognizes the tremendous role and challenge that he's been charged with. He doesn't feel up to the task on his own, and so he appeals to God for basically wisdom, practical wisdom, so that I can discern how to lead these people and make good judgments. And God just loves what he asks for and tells him that, you know what, I'm gonna give you that in spades. Spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs, in every. Is that where spades comes from, or does it just mean shovels full? I don't know. Wheelbarrows full. Such that there's not going to be anyone. Now help me with this, because there's the wealth and there's the wisdom. And superlative language is used in both cases. I think the wealth is no one of your era, and I think the wisdom is before you and after you. You could correct me on that. But I'm going to give you the wisdom. I'm also going to give you the wealth. I'm also going to give you peace and basically domination over your neighbors. And if you continue to follow me, if you follow me faithfully, I'll give you one more thing. What was that? A long life. Which is the first commandment. No, that's the parents. Never mind. So, really good start. Really good start to ask for that. Here's another observation, is that it seems, does it not, that Yahweh is interacting with Solomon repeatedly over time. There's discussion about the temple, the plans for the temple. There's this encounter here where he offers him to make a request. It seems like there's several occasions where the Lord is communicating with him. That's not typical of kings throughout the years. It's occasional, but Solomon gets a lot of communication from the Lord. There's the story about the two prostitutes, and that surprised me. I was like, wait, they were prostitutes? I don't remember that. And so I went back and checked a couple translations. Yes, they were harlots, prostitutes. Nothing is said about that. You know, these two prostitutes are coming before the king with a complaint. I was like, okay. Okay. Two prostitutes, two babies. One of them's dead. One of them's alive. I think that this episode has become a little cliche, right? Are you, frankly, be honest with me now, are you really that impressed with his wisdom from this story? Not anymore, right? Because we've been hearing it our whole lives, and so it's kind of like, yeah, I think I could have figured that one out. Since I've known it from childhood, I think I could have figured that one out. But what is the reaction when this word of this little scene starts spreading? What's the word? What's the impression?
Amazing judgment.
Yeah. Where's that at? 28, thank you. When all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had handed down. I think that's a specific scene here. I don't think that's just generically. I think it's this story got out. They feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. Again, this is another one of those times we all feel this way, I suppose, where we wish we had another story and another story. Would you like to not, be able to read through the chronicles, the annals of Solomon, just wowing people with his discernment and penetrating through some knotty political problem, right? Like, do you ever daydream about having Jesus or Solomon's, like Jesus the last week of his life, or Solomon's wisdom, and you were like in modern times, and you got these international issues, and you got these economic issues, and you wish you could just like pontificate and just say, well, here's the answer. No, I'm the only one? Okay. All right, that's fair. That's about the score of things. Hand? 40 years younger than when he ended. No, I don't know. Yes, sir.
I was just gonna point out that from what we read here, he had 2 children yet. And I think the wisdom part came when he realized how much a mother loves a child.
Yeah.
It even astounds me sometimes, the difference in the way my wife will handle things with the kids if they, just totally went off the deep end.
Yeah.
The way I would.
Yeah.
And so for him to see that, I think was the wise thing
Fair.
at his age.
Yeah. That reminds me of a little conversation I had with my brother. The lawyer brother that none of you have ever met because, well, few of you have had a wedding. If there's a wedding, he comes. But back several years, this was Trump and 3 appointments to the Supreme Court, right? And when Comey Barrett, Amy Comey Barrett was appointed, he was like so stoked. And I'm like, okay, explain that. He said, well, number one, she's a woman. Is she Catholic? I can't remember. She's Catholic. She's Catholic and she's a woman? I mean, you can't get any better than that on pro-life. I said, what do you mean? I mean, what about a man? And he said, no. Women are just basically pro-life, so much more than a man, on average. Now, do you find women who are not pro-life, who are aborting their babies? Yes. But to their core, on average, women are going to be more pro-life. That was his case, right? I mean, he said, my wife is more pro-life than I am. I'm like, what do you mean? You're not pro-life? But he's going deep down, right? Your instincts, your guts, right? And I think that's what you're talking about, is just like the way you view the world. just in your DNA, instinctively, the way you gut react to scenes, situations, conflicts. I think that's a fair point. Okay, nobody's going to take me up on that one. We've already commented on this. Chapter 4 talks about Solomon's administration, and there's people mentioned there. All the officials. You got the priest and the secretaries and the recorders, and the king Benaiah is over the army. You got Abiathar and Zadok, priests. Of course, Abiathar was deposed. Deputies, different roles. And then you got this section there, 7 through 19, where the king makes provision for himself and his household and all the people who he's responsible for providing. And what pops into your head there?
They wanted a king.
Yeah.
People wanted a king, and Samuel let them know what that was going to be.
Yeah. So government gets bigger.
Later on, we know that people got tired of it.
Yes.
Too much.
Yes. After 40 years of Solomon, it was a heavy, onerous weight. I don't know if it's Thomas Sowell. I don't know if it's Milton Friedman. For me personally, decades ago, that just kind of pointed out, wait a minute, government is not lacking interest. Government's not an unbiased arbiter. Government's not this harmless, this thing. Government is people, and people all have self-interests. You talk about budgets. What happens with departments and budgets every year? Does any department head say, you know what, we don't need all that money, we're going to give it back and just put it back into the general fund? Nobody does that. You know why? Because everybody wants more power, more responsibility, more accomplishment, and you don't get there in the way of the way human beings operate by giving money back. You want a bigger budget next year. And what program has the federal government ever passed that 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, they say, we've reviewed that and we don't really need that anymore. There's kind of some redundancies and there's overlapping, so we're going to excise that and cut it out. When does that ever happen? It doesn't. It just keeps adding and adding, bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what happens with Israel and Solomon is, I need this, I need that, and it costs money, and so you guys are going to pay for it. Yeah, go ahead.
I just said use it or lose it.
Right. I like this statement. This is one of those nice little summary statement in the midst there that captures kind of like a picture. If you had a Norman Rockwell picture of Israel during the reign of Solomon, Judah and Israel were as many as the sand of the sea. They ate and drank and were happy. Life was good.
That was kind of the whole driving force for Moses, telling the big baby, we're going to this land.
Yeah, flowing with milk and honey. You'll have a chicken in every pot. You'll all be sitting under your fig tree. Yeah. And then I need to jump ahead to show you the map. So the red is before David became king, so that would be Saul or maybe Judges. I mean, of course, this is expanding and contracting at various times throughout the period of the Judges. Then you got the orange is what David added and kind of subdued. And then Solomon had economic influence all the way up to, and the text notes this, from the river to basically the boundary with Egypt. Yeah.
Sorry to reverse for a couple seconds here. Sorry, frog in my throat all of a sudden. Anyway,
Frogs are green, and it's St. Patrick's Day, and you're wearing green, so it's all good.
I'm catching up with you on the text here and back to the high places.
Yeah.
It said that there was no temple built yet. And that was where
saved is sacrificing to other gods, and that
Correct.
there, so I think we kind of, at least I was taking from what we said earlier, that, hey, you start from straight here and go after other gods.
No, not other gods.
Okay, gotcha.
No, what I was saying is that the progression from pure, true worship to Yahweh, the way He prescribed, all the way over here to where we're just doing anything and everything, and Yahweh's like, we've lost the law, and the temple's a mess, and nobody prays to Yahweh. It's little baby steps. And the first thing apparently is people are just going and worshiping Yahweh in places that are not the prescribed place, right? And this is a Romans 1 thing where people, you look at a sunset and you're like, wow, that's so beautiful. Is that good? Is that a good impulse? Yeah, what's the next thing you think? What's the next thing you say? God is the creator, right? It's supposed to point you to God. And what unfortunately a good number of human beings throughout history have done is they say, wow, I'm going to paint that. I'm going to paint that, and then I'm going to hold it up and display it, and then people come by and they're like, wow, Leonardo, he was so good. Raphael, man, well, look at that. And it's all about the human being, or they turn it into some kind of, it's not pointing to God. Same thing with animals, same with the human form, right? So worshiping the creature instead of the creator, okay? And so I think the high places is, I think that is this impulse being perverted. Is that you want to go to, where do you want to pray? Where do you want to pray? Do you want to pray in a hospital room that's white and drab and no lights and it's hard floors? Is that where you want to go pray? Is that where you want to have a house of prayer in a clinical, sterile? No. Where would you rather do that? Wouldn't you rather do that in a beautiful, ornate church building or in a beautiful, natural place? I think most people do that, right? The problem is you start getting distracted, right? Your eyes come off of God, your heart comes off of God, and it starts getting distracted by the scenery, by the elements, by the building, by the decorations, right? Yeah. All right. Yeah.
You notice that Solomon, after he received his wisdom and woke up in his dream, offered sacrifices before the ark after that.
Sure.
So it may be that part of his wisdom and part of his understanding caused him to repent.
Okay. There's a discussion there. So some comments about his wealth. There's some comments about his wisdom. There's specific people named who were legendary at that time for being so wise and discerning, and he eclipsed them. Another summary statement, verse 24 and 25, he had peace on all sides. Judah and Israel lived in safety from Dan to Beersheba, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, all the days of Solomon. So, the glory days, the golden age. Chapter 5, Solomon intends to build a house for the Lord. Now we know that, it's not a surprise, but it's in the context of him reaching out to Hiram, a king who, he was king during David's reign. They had a good relationship. I think it says Hiram loved David. They had a really good relationship, not just politically peaceful, but they had a friendship, an affinity for one another. They cooperated. And so Solomon reaches out to Hiram and expresses his intention. This is what I want to do for Yahweh, the name of the Lord. David, my father, as you know, was not able to do that. I've been tasked with doing that. And I want to build this with the best materials I can lay my hands on. And everybody knows that the best wood materials, at least cypress and cedars, are up there with you, Hiram. So I'd like to ask you to help me with this. You guys not only have the you not only have the raw materials, but you are craftsmen and masters of cutting it down and doing whatever you do with it, the workmanship there. So he's excited. Hiram's just pleased to be invited to this. They strike a deal on what the compensation's going to be. And, they start cutting these big timbers, and they lash them together and create, what would we call those? Rafts, floats, whatever, and they float it on the sea to wherever Solomon wants it to port. Well, Solomon's not going to be cutting down. Solomon's not going to be go fetching those trees. So there's a description of the forced labor. Seems pretty clever. Maybe he was ahead of his time, where you have 3 teams of people, you cycle through them, so you get 2 months off and 1 month working. Were they paid? Is the forced part that you have to do it and you have to give up whatever your other lifestyle was? Does it also mean that they weren't paid? I don't think it implies that they weren't paid. They had to eat, right? But they were drafted. One translation says they had a draft, and they picked people. Now, who do you think they picked? The infirm, the crippled? No, they picked the strapping young men, right? And yeah. Any comments about chapter 5? Okay, chapter 6, Solomon builds the temple. Are we ready to go? Okay, so I think we got time. When does the first bell at 15, second bell at 20? Okay, so I found a video, it's about 4 minutes and change. Of the ones I looked at, I liked it. I think it's not distracting, and I think it's probably pretty accurate. So rather than trying to describe all of this in detail, we're going to watch this video, and David, my IT department, thinks he's got sound and video.
In the 480th year, after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, that he began to build the house of the Lord.
Can you give us any more volume?
Which King Solomon built for the Lord. The length thereof was 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof 20 cubits, and the height thereof of 30 cubits, and the porch before the temple of the house 20 cubits of the house, and 10 cubits was the breadth. And for the house he made windows of narrow lights. And against the wall of the house he built chambers round about, 5 cubits high, and they rested on the house with timber of cedar. The nethermost chamber was 5 cubits broad, and the middle was 6 cubits broad, and the third was 7 cubits broad. For without in the wall of the house he made narrowed rests round about. Fir tree. The 2 leaves of the one